Pterodactyl, pterodactyl, what are you? What are you? I'm a flying reptile over birds and mountainsides. Birds can fly. So can I. I'd like to be the biggest dinosaur. I'm not, but I can fly, and I like that more. Triceratops had 3 long horns, a beak like a pear, and a thrill where his neck is. Triceratops had 3 long horns and a tail in back. What was that T-Rex one? Heck, I'd like to remember the Stegosaurus one. Okay, let's start this review. Welcome to our first retro review, where we look at older movies, see if they still hold up, and try to look at them from original point of view as well. Yeah, just forget about all that bad singing you just heard. That was just stuff I remember from a long time ago. Anyway, for our first retro review, this is Retro Review Jurassic Park. I think it's pretty easy to say that a lot of people loved dinosaurs when they were kids. Some still do to this day. I know a few of them myself. When it comes to me, I like dinosaurs, but clearly I'm more into collecting superheroes and nostalgia TV show things. Dinosaurs are not really my cup of tea. They're not the things that I really dig into, really study. I'm just not into it as much as I know some people are, which could help me in enjoying these Jurassic Park, Jurassic World movies more than people who are obsessed with dinosaurs. But it has to be said that Jurassic Park, when it first came out, was a huge deal. It set the bar for what dinosaurs would look like. It was top notch at the time it came out. There's no denying that. And as I'll talk about later, a lot of the stuff still holds up today. It was instrumental in just the CG work it did in creating the dinosaurs that it did. And there's actually a really good Netflix special called The Movies That Made Us, and they actually do one on Jurassic Park, which is where I know, or where I found out some of this information. So I do recommend you check that out if you love Jurassic Park. But tonight I decided let's dig in a little bit to this movie. Let's look at the characters, let's look at the stories, the visuals, see how much of it still holds up to this day, while trying at the same time to maybe look back and imagine if you weren't there, which I didn't see this movie when it first premiered. I was too young at the time. But try to think about what it was like the first time either you saw it or even the first time it came out in theaters for the people that got the chance to see it. We'll look at all that stuff. We'll look at, like I said, we'll look at story, characters, and then we'll put everything else together with special effects, music, locations, all that good stuff. So join me for our first retro review look at Jurassic Park. Let's start our journey through Jurassic Park by looking at the story. Now, I was really happy that I got a chance to see this movie on the big screen for the first time. Yes, I'd seen it before, but I'd never seen it on the big screen. And if you saw my review for Dominion, then you've heard this all before. But what I loved about that was just getting to experience what it was like when this movie first came out. And of course, it helped remind me things that I'd forgotten about the movie, which helped me love Jurassic World Dominion even more. But the story itself is actually quite simple. It's not that difficult of a story to follow, but it's a good one. It's a good one because it's solid. It has very few flaws, except for one subplot that a lot of people will probably diss on me for saying is not a good one. but hear me out. And honestly, overall, it doesn't really have many misses. There's not really many parts of the story that just fall apart. Sure, if you want to nitpick it, there's probably a million little subplots or a million little things you could nitpick. And if you love dinosaurs, you'd probably nitpick how the dinosaurs look to shreds. But overall, the story flows. It's very solid. It moves along. There's no real parts where it slows down, where it takes its time, except when it actually needs to, when it's building suspense or building this world, building on the characters. And that's the sign of an overall good movie. Now, talking about the big part of this movie that I realized, I'm like, you just don't need it. And it's really the part of this movie that slows everything down. If there is a moment where the movie slows down, it's when this happens. The whole subplot with Wayne Knight and him wanting to get DNA out of the park to sell to competitors, and how he even gets there in the first place, the things he causes, him getting spit in the face by that dinosaur, I forget what it's called. That stuff is still hilarious. But that whole subplot, when you really think about it, it's not really needed, because it takes away, I feel, from the momentum you've built up through the rest of the film so far, up to that point. At first, it might feel like, okay, this is going to be a big deal. This is going to be a major part of the movie, or at least that's what you're thinking when he first shows up. But let's be honest, he's really just comic relief. And I'm sorry, but yeah, he might be funny the first time around, but he's really not that funny. And the subplot kind of just goes like that. Halfway through, it's done. His only purpose, really, in the overall grand scheme of the film, is to shut the power down so you can have dinosaurs escape, to get spit in the face so you can have that comedic moment with the dinosaur, and basically just cause problems for the park so you can have people eaten, you can have dinosaurs running amok, and you can cause all this chaos. I really feel like, again, or before I say this, I'm not a top-notch screenwriter. I'm not a top-notch director. I didn't go to school for directing or screenwriting. I did for acting, but I don't know everything that I'm talking about. I'll be flat out honest. But it seems to me that you could have done something different here. You could have given the comedic roles to somebody else. I mean, the lawyer. You could have had the lawyer just be a total jerk. He could have been the one that maybe timed something to go off at a specific time and he didn't expect he would be there. Or you could have had the dino trainer actually be a double agent and make him the villain of the piece. You could have done something. You didn't need Dwayne Knight's character, if you're being completely honest. Because just think about it. In the overall grand scheme of things, in the overall plot, what does he really serve? Again, besides causing the problems to get the dinosaurs loose, to have the rest of the adventure, to shut the park down. It sounds like a big deal, but honestly, I feel like you could have had somebody else do it. It really sets up everything well with this concept and just the procedure behind how the dinosaurs are cloned. That's another aspect which they do very well, is explaining, well, here's our science behind how we clone the dinosaurs. Now, I would like to imagine, or I think that science is probably pretty accurate, but I don't know if we can actually do it. I don't think we have the technology to actually clone a dinosaur yet, or at least we might be close. As long as we learn from these movies, don't really want to do that. But I like how they make it feel like this could be real. They make it feel like this science actually exists and this science actually works. And like I said, maybe it does. I'm not a genetic scientist, so I don't know. But they make it work here. And that whole little animated short that they do explaining how they got the DNA, where everything came from, that was actually kind of cool. That's neat. And I think that's a creative way to explain it because, frankly, if I'm thinking about this from a younger kid's point of view, I would much rather have watched a cartoon explaining stuff to me, even school stuff, mathematics. I probably would have enjoyed it much more if I had a cartoon when I was young explaining math to me than listening to a teacher drone on and on, or unless I had a teacher that made it fun. And I think that's what works here. They make this science work and they make it entertaining in a way that it's not just some old guy explaining to everybody, well, here's how we did it. We took this and we did this, and then we did this and we did this. That would just be boring in my opinion. Like I said, everything in this movie, for the most part, is pretty believable when it comes to the science of it. I took a screenwriting class in college, and I really remember my professor saying one of the most important things you need to do when writing a script is introduce your main characters and your main players within the first 15 to 20 minutes, maybe half hour. And with one exception, with that being that of the kids, we meet everybody within that time frame, which is perfect. That's what a good screenplay does. One that I'll talk about later doesn't do that. But here, like I said, with the exception of the kids, we meet everyone within a timely manner. And the kids, that's fine because they are not a key player in this film. No matter what you might think, let's look at them briefly. Really, all they're there for is to move Grant's story along. They're there to add another perspective on the park. They're there to add more character for Hammond. They're there to have an adventure. They're not really key players in the overall narrative of this film. So, with them being introduced later, that's okay. They're still introduced sooner than some of the other characters who are even more of minor characters than they are. So that works. This movie overall has a lot of great humor, a great adventure. It's got tons of horror aspects, and it has a good mix of them. Everything works together. They blend these different types of genres. You got the sci-fi there, you've got the adventure, you've got the horror. You got all of these, and they do a really good job of just blending it all together. And if there ever is a moment where you start to kind of feel like, okay, can we move on? Bam, they hit you with something, whether it's a joke or whether they're going through looking for the dinosaurs when it's safe. You're waiting and waiting for a dinosaur to appear. You're right there with them, and that's great. That's another thing this film does, is it puts you in the seats with these characters. And you're like, okay, is one going to jump out? Is one going to do something? And maybe some people that might be like, okay, you're dragging this out. When are we going to see a dinosaur already? But it works because the story hits you with that impact so much better when it actually happens compared to just randomly throwing it out there when you want it to happen. This is one of those times when the movie, the screenwriters, they know what's better for the story than you do. And usually that's the case with a lot of movies. But then again, maybe sometimes the audience knows what's better. Not here to debate that. But when it comes to Jurassic Park, they definitely knew how to keep the pacing good, how to create those moments of suspense, those moments of humor, and they nailed it on the head. But what's a story without the players, without its characters? And Jurassic Park has some very memorable ones. Yes, each of the characters are unique in their own way. They have their own personalities, they have their own relationships, they have their own views on the world, all that good stuff. But there is one thing they all have in common. As soon as we meet them, we have a general idea, and a good one, of who they are and the type of person they are, their general relationships, and we do get a great evolution for most of our characters throughout the film. So let's talk about the main players in this film individually. We start with Sam Neill and Laura Dern playing Grant and Ellie. This is a great duo. They just play so well off each other. From the moment you see them, you know clearly there's something going on between the two of them. Clearly there's some type of tension there. Younger kids might not pick up on that because they'll just be relating, where's dinosaurs? I want to see dinosaurs. But the older you get, or the older you are when you first watch this film, you can pick up pretty quickly on that relationship between the two of them. From the way they look at each other, from the way that Ellie just kind of smirks and holds her head when the kid challenges Grant about raptors. You just really get a good idea from the very beginning the type of relationship these two have. But it's a relationship that you're also not quite sure about either. Clearly they have a good working relationship, but are they a couple? And that's a question that actually is answered later on in the film and later on in the overall series and the franchise. But it starts with that first introduction. We establish early on, like I said, with the raptor scene, we establish that Grant does not take any crap from anyone, especially punk-ass kids who think they know everything. I would imagine this is how he would act in his everyday life with everybody else, just in general. I mean, he acts this way with Hammond when they first meet him in the trailer. But when it comes to dinos, and especially raptors, it's very clear that Grant does not take any crap about it. He takes it very seriously and is a huge part of what makes him him. Whereas with Ellie, it's more fun. She just loves dinosaurs. She loves just the idea of them. As we see later on with the Triceratops, she's very into what makes a dinosaur tick, into their biology, into just the type of animals that they would have been. Or in this case, the type of animals that they are. So they have a different perspective on it. Grant is very scientific, very respect these animals, where Ellie is just, dinosaurs are fun and we need to understand them and I want to be friends with them in general. I mean, she knows that they're dangerous, but she's more carefree. And she knows this, especially when you see her get the when the guy challenges Grant about raptors. This makes this makes their turns though much more interesting later on in the film. Because if you watch closely, you'll see that Ellie slowly turns to become the more concerned one. She's the one that is much more concerned about the dinosaur's health. And she's the one that's much more concerned about dinosaur attacks. She plays it a lot more safety is her big concern. She's more on guard when it comes to these animals. She's concerned about everybody getting out safely. Which is not to say that Grant isn't. But you can still see through most of the film up until that last second, that last moment with the raptors attacking and the Tyrannosaurus attacking, you can see the wonderment in his eyes. You can see the joy he has of this idea that dinosaurs are actually real, that dinosaurs have been brought back. It just shows how much he loves and cares about dinosaurs, especially when he thought he would never get to see one. So it's kind of like parent and child. I'd say Grant starts off as a parent and Ellie starts off as a child. By the end of the film, they've reversed, where Grant is more of the child and Ellie is more of the adult. Then we talk about the man who set all this up, the man that said that famous line, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." Richard Attenborough. I think I said his name right, but probably not. He embodies Hammond so well. And from the very beginning, it's clear that this, to him, it's more than just a lifelong dream to bring dinosaurs back. This is his childhood. He has a childlike joy, childlike wonderment from the very beginning of just, wow, I did this. We did this. We were able to create a place where people can see dinosaurs, real live dinosaurs. And he doesn't care about the money that they'd be making, which is an interesting contradiction to the point where we see a lot of these big businessmen coming up with these ideas in movies, and some would argue in real life, that they're only concerned about making that almighty dollar. But not Hammond. Hammond wants the world to enjoy dinosaurs. He wants everybody to experience his love of these creatures, just this forgotten world that he's been able to bring back thanks to his scientists and their discoveries and everything they've accomplished. You can't help but love this guy from the very beginning. He's so much fun. He takes no offense when Grant doesn't know who he is. He says, "The guy who's paying your checks." And of course, Grant's there like, oh, I'm sorry. But Hammond just laughs it off. He really is that jolly grandfather that you always want to have, or maybe the jolly uncle. And you can see that when he has his grandkids. And then you can see the grandfather come out more when the kids are in danger, and you see that's his focus. That's what he's concerned about. Is his family. He cares about his family. At the very beginning, you might wonder a little bit, does he care more about the dinosaurs or humans? Just by how he acts about certain aspects, about the safety of the park, or, oh, let the lawyers handle that. I don't understand why they are so bogged down by it. They're too concerned. We've had one incident or whatever. And he's just so lovable. He loves children because clearly he can come down to their level. Clearly, he's a child at heart. And I will say, sure, I'm an adult. I do adult things. I pay mortgage. I go to work. I pay bills. I do things I don't want to do, but I know I have to do. But I still keep that childlike essence inside of me. I mean, it's not like I have figures or comic books or what have you all around me in a room dedicated to that stuff. I mean, this stuff has nothing to do with that. But Hammond, I feel like thinking about it, he was the first person, in a sense, to maybe make people feel like it was okay to like this stuff. It was okay to still retain childlike wonderment, even when you're getting old and most other people think maybe it's time for you to hang up whatever you're doing. I'm sure there were people before it in movies and in real life, but thinking about it, Hammond really does give off that idea that be who you want to be, embrace what you want to embrace, and always have a joy or a wonderment about you. And then probably one of my favorite moments, and I didn't realize just how much I like this, or I totally forgot about it too, is the moment we have between Hammond and Ellie. When the kids are lost, they're sitting in the dining room and they're eating ice cream. And Hammond starts to talk about the flea circus. The fleas weren't there. You couldn't see the fleas, but yet people paid to think they were there. They said they could see the things. They said they could see the fleas do all these tricks. And just the tension in his voice, the way he carries himself is just, it's so powerful. And just thinking about it, I'm remembering just how powerful of a scene it actually is. And there's no action whatsoever, really, besides eating ice cream. But that is the deepest we get to dig into Hammond. And that's all you really need. It's that moment where you realize there's more to this guy than just wanting to build a place with dinosaurs. He actually is human. And he cares a great deal for his grandkids and for people in general. But he wants to give the world a place that they can just escape and just love the joys that's around them. Which, let's be honest, isn't that really what we're all searching for in the end? I mean, isn't that why we go back to the movies like Jurassic Park? Go back to our nostalgia things that we loved growing up. Or heck, maybe that's why I keep these things and keep collecting, is because it reminds you of a time that was simpler. A time where things were magical. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the character I'm sure everyone wants to talk about, or everyone wants me to give my thoughts on. And that's Malcolm. Jeff Goldblum's Malcolm. Notorious for saying things like, evolution finds a way. Or just being a plain jerk. But as soon as Malcolm shows up, as soon as you see him sitting there on the plane, it seems obvious that he's going to be the prick. It seems obvious that he's going to be the traditional ladies' man in this movie, hitting on Ellie for the whole time. You know, he's the cool kid on the block. The way he's just sitting there like this with the sunglasses. I think he's chewing on something. He just seems real cool and relaxed. He seems like he's going to be that character through the whole movie. You know, the one, yeah, whatever. I don't really care. I'm just too cool for school. This is my movie. I'm just going to do what I want to do. But it's not. Yeah, that's how he starts off. And yeah, that's the character overall. But there's so much more to Malcolm because there is a depth to his character. Ultimately, it's great to find out that there's more to him than just that. He cares about the science, and he's particular about the science. Yes, he may have, some people may say, screwed up their ideas or theories, though some would agree with them. But there's more to him than just that. I mean, he sacrifices, in a sense, himself, or at least gets hurt bad enough to drive the T-Rex away from the kids and Grant. So clearly, he's got some humane elements to him. And he's guiding Ellie when she's looking for the circuit breakers. But he's the voice of reason. And he makes a lot of really good points throughout the entire film. So he's one of those characters that starts off as one persona or one type of character that we think is going to happen. But then, like any good character, he evolves through the film. He has an arc in the film. Maybe it's who he really was, but it's an arc for us as the audience to see him grow as a character, to see that there's more to him than we originally thought. When you really stop and think about it, I know I've said that a lot, it's interesting to know that originally Spielberg wanted Malcolm to be a coward. He wanted him to be a coward. Let that sink in for a moment. Can you imagine how different the movie would have been? We got the coward in the lawyer. We don't need another one. Malcolm brings something different to the table. A different character, different aspect, different perspective on things. So we could say thank you, Goldblum. Thank you for convincing Spielberg not to make Malcolm a coward. Because honestly, the movie didn't need another coward. It had plenty of those as it is. And instead, we got a character with lines that are memorable, a character that people keep quoting, a character to this day that when he first shows up on screen, everybody's just excited. And he really does give off that vibe. If you think about it, we didn't know who this character was going to be. But he was pretty darn cool from the very beginning. Like I said, the shades, the cool kid, the relaxed attitude, the ladies' man type feel to him. But it's nice to know that he was so much more. He became so much more. And something that I found interesting as I watched this movie again, you think Goldblum is a big part of this movie. But he's really not. I mean, he says all the things he needs to say. He gets injured, and then he gets back. They bandage him up, and then he's just laying there and giving more advice. Now, he does his job, and he does what he's supposed to do. He helps the characters. He helps move everything along. But I can't be the only one who... I mean, obviously, people who have watched this movie every year and have watched it 1,000, 1,000,000 times, they remember this. But I can't be the only one who forgets that Malcolm really isn't as big a part in this movie as we remember. So it's kind of interesting that he took front and center over the years as this movie grew in popularity. He's the character we seem to remember first and foremost, then Hammond and Grant. It's just kind of interesting when you really think about the part he plays in this film. Finally, let's talk about Tim and Lex, the kids in the film. And these characters, they're generally fine. It makes sense that Hammond would have them there because they're his grandkids. He wants them to experience the park. But as a businessman, he would want to see what kids would think about this place, since they are the ones he's ultimately building the park for, or at least that side of people, the childlike side of people, as we've discussed. They each have their moments of being annoying, like most kids do at some point. Tim is at the very beginning when we first meet him. He's so annoying, and you understand why Grant wants to get rid of him, because he's just talking his ear off, which I know very well because I do it to plenty of people. Just ask my dad. I talk movies and comics to death around him. My wife would say that I tell her the same thing 1,000,000 times every year. So I get that. But we get why he's important later on. Lexi's moment, or Lexi's moment, I'm not exactly sure what her name is. Her annoying moment comes after the T-Rex attack, and just everything scares her. It's like, oh, here's a brontosaurus. Oh, let's leave. Get over it. You're like, come on, girl. The T-Rex is gone that you know of. It just seems like every little rustle scares her nearly to death. And while these kids are fine, they have a lot of really good moments. The raptor scene with them is great. It's memorable. The point that they're really there to serve, besides being Hammond's grandkids and giving the childlike look at the park, as I've said, is to help Grant grow as a character. Because it's established early on that he's really not a fan of kids. And this is the one contention between him and Ellie. But by the end of the movie, you see the kids snuggling into him, you see him smiling, and you realize that he's grown as a person. He's grown to maybe not necessarily like kids, but he likes kids to a certain degree. I feel like we never really get an answer to that question when it comes to him. The rest of the cast, they're fine. They really just have purposes and the main one being to get killed so that people die in this movie from dinosaurs. Whether it's Samuel L. Jackson's character, whether it's the trainer. Now, they do all serve another function, like the trainer has a reason. He's there to help guide or train the animals to the best of his ability. Samuel L. Jackson's there to help run park operations. You got the lawyer who is doing lawyer things. But in the end, let's be honest, they're there for dino feed. And so is Knight in the long run. Again, a character I really don't think needs to be in this movie. And you don't have enough of a connection with these people that you honestly don't care when they die. The lawyer, he's just a jerk. And you're like, bye-bye, don't care about you. You might care about Samuel L. Jackson's character a little bit because it's Samuel L. Jackson or he's not a total jerk. But the truth is you don't get enough time with them to really form a connection. So when they die, it's like, oh, okay, moving on. And that's their main purpose for existing in this film.